Are you trying to grow your team and they just aren't meeting expectations? Or better yet, upon reflection, do they even know your expectations? Or finally, simply, you've never completed a performance eval before and you just want to learn how to do it. My name is Eric Libby and I'm the CEO of the To-Do Dudes, where we connect students to homeowners that need help with chores in the Central Florida area. And in this video, I'm going to be covering how to conduct a performance evaluation and the do's and don'ts that you want to be thinking about. So to first start, what are performance evals and why to do them? So how I think about this is a performance evaluation is a way to monitor a team member's success or failures throughout a quarter against the criteria that you've set. So if you have goals, KPIs, expectations that you're setting, what you're going to do is you'll look back at that and then see how is that person measuring up compared to those expectations. For me, what I've learned is this creates almost an end to a chapter. So like when we do these on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis, it's putting a line in the sand of before this point, here were the successes you had, and now forward, here's what you're going to want to continue doing. Same thing for failures. Here's the failures you made. Here are the things that you can improve coming into that next quarter. So it draws a clear line in the sand. And I will preface that while there is a maybe monthly, quarterly, we do them quarterly and then also annually, you still want to be giving feedback on a regular basis. There should be a consistent feedback loop that is occurring, but that is how we've done it to make sure that I'm delivering intentional feedback when I come in and give a performance evaluation. So ultimately in this video, I'm going to be covering three different things. What I used to do when I first started this in 2022, what I'm doing now, and how I can make this even better going into this 25 year. So first starting on what I did before. So 2022 was our first admin evaluation. And the reason for this, just for context, is I started the company in 2020, like halfway through that year. It was in May of 2020. And then 21 really was me spending most of my time in the field. I was building up our client base, trying to just hustle and get good reputation going in the community. And then finally in 2022, is about midway through that year, some of our initial team members started to kind of fluctuate more into the admin side. So it wasn't just that they were in the field, they had to split responsibility. So towards the end of that year, got to the drawing board, I was thinking, okay, well, we should probably have a way to evaluate them so they know they're doing a good job, right? I've heard about all this performance evaluation stuff. And I was like, all right, let's make it happen and see what we can come up with. And so ultimately at the end of that 2022 year, I drafted a PDF document and I was going to have a meeting with them, about an hour meeting, to give feedback, check in. And I look back and I was like, what was I even doing? So prepping for this video podcast, I went back and looked at the original Google Docs PDF that I put together. So I took it from Google Docs and PDF, I sent it to each of the team members, and it had 4 different components to it. So the first one was 22 questions that I asked based on their thoughts of the organization, where their personal goals are, what they think the To-Do Dudes can accomplish in the future. The second one was the vision and mission ahead for the company. So what we're going to be doing in the future. Third was more immediate goals that we were going to be setting as a company. And the fourth was a blank portion of feedback. It said feedback as a header, but it didn't have any words under it. So what I did in that point is I went and just completely ad-libbed it. I went and just was like, all right, well, I kind of have a few points. I'm gonna write it in my notebook and then give it to them audibly. It was a big mistake, but it was my first time attempting it. So one of the things that I'll highlight there is I spent a majority of that first meeting asking questions on where they're at with the organization, what their goals with us going forward, how long are they gonna spend time here before they move on to their next opportunity. And I think, and I'm going to push on this because I think getting team feedback is really important, but not the setting, at least for us, not the setting in the performance evaluation. That time is to give them tips on actionable steps on how they can get better or how they can keep doing a good job. So there's a quote that I like by Ronald Reagan. I think it highlights it perfectly. It says, the greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest thing. He's the one that gets the people to do the greatest things. And ultimately, I was trying to get all of their feedback. I wasn't giving proper feedback to them. And so now if we play this forward where I'm asking them these questions and I'm not giving direct feedback, and now we get into a situation where they make an actual mistake, at the end of the day as a leader, that mistake comes back to us. If we are not clear with expectations, if we don't give the resources for them to know, because sometimes in some cases I found, it's not even that they don't want to do a good job. It's that they just don't even know what the job needs to be done because the leader hasn't set the expectation. I know I've made this mistake multiple times. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it can come down to three things. You either pick the wrong person for the job, you didn't provide clear instructions, or they simply don't know what a victory looks like. So for point number two, the failure came from goal setting. So at the end of 2022, what we did is we implemented a system called Traction, the EOS operating system. And I touch on this in a lot of my content because I'm a big believer this system, where if you put this into your business, you're going to have a much clearer vision ahead. You're going to be able to have a good pulse on where you're at today, get the right people into the right seats. And so we had the right intention, but the goals that we set were extremely unspecific. There was not clarity in what these things actually meant. We had these metrics that they call them scorecard and then rocks, both great things, but we didn't set it up properly. So when I gave the team instruction, it was almost frustrating in this document because it was so broad. So I'm going to read back. I found three great examples in that document that I'll highlight, and I'll show you why they weren't good. So number one was eliminate wasted meeting time. Number two, automate the marketing process. And number three, consolidate communication for field team. These were all individual goals for one of our admin members. In looking back and reflecting, I'm thinking, eliminate wasted meeting time is their quarter rock. That's their goal for the quarter. What does that mean? So if I get through a quarter and I take off 1 minute from our, say, 30-minute one-on-one meeting, does that win the goal? Or in the case of consolidating team member communication, if I move one Slack channel to another one, does that win the goal? And so the problem at this point was that there was so much gray. There was no clear, the big thing is, how do we know if we won or lost? And so we get to the end of the quarter and then realize, we look back and be like, did we actually get this done? And if you want to reinforce a powerful cycle with A players in your organization that want to do a good job, there has to be a clear victory at the end. There has to be a clear end goal. Once we've hit this mark, we know that we've won. And I didn't do that. On the one positive note, when I look back at the goals, is we didn't have too many goals. And I want to highlight this because it's important as you grow in an organization, you want to take on all these challenges, you want to set 9, 10, 11, 12 different priorities. At this point, we only had a few. And I think probably because we just didn't really know what we should have been doing. And that was a problem. It was kind of a catch-22 later on. It's like we had more goals, we were going to get more done. But at the same time, because there are more goals, that means we're going to be less effective. Everything's going to be diluted. So it was a big learning that we had too. We were doing okay then, and then we come into more present day, and this is where we made a few mistakes. So to transition into our second point is what we are doing today. I did that performance evaluation, created that PDF, made everything, had that meeting in 2022. And then I looked back after a few months elapsed and I'm like, what did that really accomplish? What did we get done? And so when looking back, I was like, you know what? This is kind of a waste of time. I spent all this time to prep for this, and which, funny looking back now, probably wasn't really that much time. But I was thinking that at the time, I was, wow, all this time I invested, not really working out. Let's just cut the whole performance evals. I'll just kind of talk to the team every once in a while. So completely removed it. And it was like that with no performance evaluation until 2024. So we go from the end of 2022, moving into the new calendar year of 23. And then about midway through 2024 is when we brought this back. And what happened was we onboarded a new customer support specialist. And I wanted to make sure, because we made a mistake before in our previous hire, that this one was going to work, that we were going to do a great job. And I knew I had to set expectations from the get-go and be very clear in what we were looking for. And so when he joined in June of that year, what I did is I set initial expectations. I had a whole document written out. We went through it line by line. This is the expectations. This is how we're going to measure performance. At the end of 1 month, we're going to come back and evaluate, how did you do? So I put some key things on there. I put in the goal for the role. Here's the things that the problems you're trying to solve. Here is what success looks like. Here are failure points that could possibly happen. Here's your compensation. And we're going to reevaluate at the end of the month. So it's funny because we get to the end of a month and I go and evaluate that CS role. And I lay out, it didn't take me too much time, but I went out and laid out thoughtful feedback. I was precise with my language. I wanted to make sure that this was going to be something that he could take into the future. And when I realized the impact it had on reinforcing the cycle, here are the expectations, here's an evaluation of the expectations, and now here's where we go from here. I asked the rest of the admin team, do they want it? And they said, absolutely yes. That would be so helpful to understand what you are expecting of us. So I realized, like, okay, we got to put this together. I got to do one for the rest of the team. So to come back to point number one in the first section, the biggest change from 22 to 24 was the precision in feedback. And like I mentioned, if you do not provide clear explanation of where you want them to go, it's not going to happen. So what I did is I put together 2 to 4. This is what I do every quarter now, is 2 to 4 wins, things that they did very well, and then 2 to 4 things that they could improve upon. And with that, it's not just It's not just what here is the high level overview. It's here's a sentence just as a description, as kind of a header. And then I go into detail as to what that meant. So here are the actions I observed. Here's what you did. And here's what you can continue with. So usually about a paragraph, maybe about 2 paragraphs of information that I put into each one of those to make sure it's very precise on how they can win going into the future. So I'm going to give an example and how to make one bad, and then how to think about making a good one. So first, on a bad one, you need to get better at speaking to the team because currently they're not bought into the vision. If that was the overall goal, so get better at speaking to the team because they're not bought into the vision. How is that helpful for anybody? What actions can someone take from that? I mean, they can guess, they can assume, but if there's things that the leader sees, be precise, have more precision in what you're saying, because if you do not provide that clarity, they're not going to know, again, they're not going to know what you're thinking. So an adjustment to that one could be, currently the team is not bought into the vision. A few ways to turn this around could be planning team events with more notice, getting more people to show up, checking in with the team on their personal goals maybe, or sending a survey at the end of the month to get their feedback. So bottom line, what that means is providing the feedback as a high level, and then getting into the details of what that looks like and how they can continue or adjust the behavior that they've already shown. The second one was goal setting. And there's a book by Dan Martell called The Buyback Principle. And one of the things he talks about in that book is the definition of done. What that means is when you assign a project to properly delegate, be able to pull out of a role, kind of expanding everybody's role, but giving yourself more free time, you have to set clear expectations as to what something looks like when it is completed. Now, returning back to the examples before, like eliminating wasted meeting time or automating the marketing process, etc., those goals are blurry. It doesn't give clear sense of where you're trying to go. And so if I look back on the biggest changes we made this year is setting the clear expectation of what it means to win. So some of our updated goals from where we were in the end of 2022 to 24 were adjusted as things like launch 50 paid ads or reach out to 1,000 customers or attend 5 student events. Very clear, you know if you won or lost. So ultimately, what changes are you going to see if you apply these principles? Your team's going to move at a quicker pace with less confusion and provide you the ability to truly delegate. And as a bonus to this section, what we typically do is we'll tie a goal that needs to be hit with some sort of financial incentive just to align the team member and the company's goals together. And the third one is the level of follow-up. And honestly, this is an area where I think we could do much better. I think we've made progress. We basically went from 2022, created a PDF document, had a meeting, and then just left it there, and we're moving into the next year. Where this year, where it was a little bit different, is we created it, and then we'd reference back maybe 1 or 2 times for the ways that they could improve throughout the quarter, and then looked at the bonuses to see how that was going, but so seldom, not nearly enough to actually have good feedback. And there's this maxim, and I don't know how much truth there is to it, but I've seen that I think it is pretty true when in most cases, is it's called the rule of 7. If you want people to remember a truth, you have to repeat it at least 7 times for it to catch on. In a lot of cases, it might even be more than that. And I think that's where we failed, is we would bring it up, but we wouldn't come back to it in multiple occasions. Which leads into the final part of this video, is how can we make this even better? And so I'm asking myself the question, can we get more output from our team by just simple quarterly review? With the performance evaluations, my thoughts went from this is something I should do to not important to do at all because it's a waste of time to I see the value because the clarity of thought and direction it can provide will actually inspire action. So I see 3 clear changes that I can make in the 2025 year. Number 1 is the increased frequency of the feedback loop. So right away from 2024 evals, the static document was sent out, minimal follow-ups occurred. It was better than the end of 2022, but not ideal. I think one way that I can implement this into our company, a huge learning I took away is if I were to put this as a scheduled time for each time we have our one-to-ones, is bring back up this document, the ways that we can improve. So if we incorporate into our conversations, like, hey, this is what we gave at the beginning of the quarter. These are the ways we wanted to adjust coming into the next quarter. Let's monitor to see how things are going. Providing the feedback, again, here are the feedback ways. Here are the clear action steps you can take from here to actually change your actions that you're taking, which goes into point number 2 is having clear actions post-meeting. So when you're giving that feedback, instead of just a general here, let's talk about it and let's move on, there has to be clear follow-up after. So in the case I gave earlier, the team's engagement is not very high. All right, action item from here, let's schedule to put a survey out. Let's have you reach out to 5 to 10 team members this week and check in, see how their personal goals are going, see what they think of the organization, if there's any feedback that they would give there. And it's like the clear actions to actually make progress rather than a conceptual, let's talk about it, both nod our head, agree, and then move on to the next thing. And number three, the role moving forward. And I incorporated this a little bit in this past performance eval, but I do believe people like to know, on most cases, people like to know what the vision ahead is. Where are we going? And it's, I mean, especially for me, but most people, if they feel that they're stagnant, they're not moving anywhere, then the discretionary effort to really push past to expand what is possible for them in this moment is going to be a lot more difficult to extract. So what I did in this past meeting, I'm going to continue to emphasize it, is what is this role doing now? What skill deficiency do we have? Where are we trying to get better at? And ultimately, once you have those skills, what does compensation look like? And also, what does that role look like in terms of growth for maybe possible other management, leadership, other opportunities within the company? Highlighting that clearly so they know what they need to do to get to that next point rather than it's just uncertainty. As a final takeaway, performance evaluations for me have been a very helpful tool. It's defining what the specific action items, the specific role responsibilities are, the KPIs, how can they meet them? What are the good and bad things that they're doing right now to try and elevate, but being specific with it. And if you could just think, imagine what a world would look like if every single team member was aligned on mission, vision, values, clarity of role, and everything was dialed in. Just imagine that for a second. While performance evaluations are not going to get you all the way there, they will get closer to helping your team realize the full vision. If this video podcast was helpful in any way, if you could share it, maybe rate it on whatever platform you're listening on, and even text me, email me, let me know from some feedback, DM me on social media. If there's things that you want to hear about, things that would be helpful as a business owner or someone aspiring to be a business owner. All right, take care. Enjoy.